A corrupt judge mocked and dismissed a biker daughter during her testimony about being assaulted. He called her a biker brat looking for attention. The next morning, 100 Hell's Angels filled every seat in his courtroom. What happened next ended his career forever and changed the justice system in ways nobody could have predicted. Judge Howard Blackwell had been on the bench for 12 years. He was 58 years old, with silver hair perfectly styled, expensive suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and an ego that filled every corner of his courtroom. He was arrogant, connected, and utterly convinced of his own untouchable status. Or so he thought. Blackwell ran Department 7 of the Superior Court, like it was his personal kingdom. His gavel was his scepter. His word was law, literally. Defense attorneys whispered warnings to each other in the hallways. Don't cross Blackwell. He'll destroy your case and your career. Prosecutors knew which cases to bring to his courtroom and which ones to avoid. Everyone had learned, through painful experience, exactly who held the real power. His chambers were decorated with photographs of himself shaking hands with senators, governors, and wealthy businessmen. His desk held a crystal decanter of expensive whiskey that he'd pour from every afternoon at exactly 4:15 p.m., regardless of whether court was still in session. His secretary had learned to schedule nothing important after 4 o'clock because the judge would be indisposed. But Judge Blackwell's greatest skill wasn't his knowledge of law. It was his network of favors, obligations, and mutual protection. He belonged to the right country club, played golf with the right people, and knew exactly which cases to rule favorably in exchange for campaign donations, vacation home invitations, and other benefits that never appeared on any official record. In his 12 years on the bench, Judge Blackwell had presided over thousands of cases. He'd sent poor people to prison for stealing food while letting wealthy, drunk drivers walk free with suspended sentences. He'd ruled in favor of his friends' businesses in civil cases where the law clearly said otherwise. He'd dismissed charges against the children of powerful people while throwing the book at kids from the wrong side of town, and nobody had ever successfully challenged him. Complaints to the Judicial Commission went nowhere. Appeals were rarely successful. The few lawyers who'd tried to report his behavior found their careers mysteriously stalling. Judge Howard Blackwell seemed immune to consequences, protected by a system that valued connections over justice, until the day he made the mistake of mocking the wrong girl. Sophia. Sophie Chen was not supposed to be a statistic. She was not supposed to be a victim. She was a girl who had her entire future mapped out with color-coded planners and determination that impressed even her toughest teachers. Sophie maintained a 4.0 GPA at Jefferson High School, where she took advanced placement classes that challenged students twice her age. She was the youngest member of the debate team, known for her logical arguments and calm demeanor under pressure. She played first-chair violin in the school orchestra and practiced 2 hours every single day after finishing her homework. Her bedroom walls were covered with college acceptance letters from her older cousins, law school admission statistics printed from websites, and a handwritten timeline showing her path from high school to the Supreme Court. Yes, Sophie Chen wanted to be a Supreme Court justice someday. She told anyone who asked, and plenty of people who didn't, that she would change the justice system to make it fair for everyone. Justice should be blind, she'd written in her essay for honors English class. It shouldn't matter if you're rich or poor, what color your skin is, or who your parents are. The law should protect everyone equally, and judges should be the guardians of that principle. Her teacher had given her an A+ and written in the margins, "Sophie, you're going to do amazing things. Never lose this passion for justice." But Sophie had a secret that she rarely discussed at school. Her father was Dragon, born Michael Chen, a respected member of the Devil's Disciples Motorcycle Club. Not the president, not an officer, just a loyal member who'd worn the patch for 15 years. He worked as a union electrician, paid his taxes, owned his house, and loved his daughter more than anything in the world. Dragon had lost his wife, Sophie's mother, to cancer, when Sophie was only 7 years old. He'd raised her alone, teaching her to be strong, smart, and unafraid. He'd helped with homework every night, attended every school concert and parent-teacher conference, and never missed a single important moment in his daughter's life. The other members of the Devil's Disciples called Sophie Little Dragon because she had her father's fierce determination and protective instincts. When she was younger, She'd spend weekend afternoons at the clubhouse while her dad attended meetings, doing her homework at the bar while bikers quietly made sure nobody disturbed her studies. Spike, the club's vice president, had taught her basic self-defense. "You're going to be a powerful woman someday, little dragon," he'd said during one lesson. Powerful women need to know how to protect themselves. Those self-defense lessons would save her life 3 months before her 14th birthday. The party at Madison Parker's house wasn't supposed to be a big deal, just a sweet 16 celebration for one of Sophie's classmates. Sophie normally didn't go to parties. She preferred spending Friday nights studying or practicing violin, but her father had encouraged her to go. "You need to be a teenager sometimes," Dragon had told her. "All work and no fun isn't healthy. Go to the party, have some cake, spend time with kids your age." Sophie had agreed reluctantly. She'd worn jeans and a nice blouse, nothing fancy. She told her father she'd be home by 10 p.m. He'd dropped her off at 7:30, telling her to call if she needed a ride home early. The party was crowded, loud, and overwhelming. Sophie spent the first hour in a corner, talking to 2 other girls from her AP history class about the upcoming midterm exam. But around 9 p.m., she'd needed to use the bathroom. That's when Derek Morrison had approached her. Derek was 19 years old, home from college for the weekend. He was Madison's older brother, tall and athletic, with the kind of confident swagger that came from never being told no. He was also the son of Police Chief Robert Morrison, which meant he'd spent his entire life watching rules bend around him. "Hey, you look lost," Derek had said, all charm and white teeth. "Bathroom's upstairs. I'll show you where it is." Sophie had hesitated. Something in his smile felt wrong. But she was in a house full of people, in a safe neighborhood, at a supervised party. What could happen? Everything, as it turned out. Derek had led her upstairs, but instead of showing her to the bathroom, he'd steered her toward a bedroom at the end of the hall. Before Sophie realized what was happening, they were inside, and he'd locked the door behind them. "Derek, I just need the bathroom," Sophie had said, her instincts screaming danger. "Don't be like that," Derek had replied, moving closer. "You're that smart girl, right? The one who's always top of every class? I like smart girls." He'd pushed her onto the bed before she could react. His breath smelled like beer and something stronger. His cologne was overwhelming, expensive and cloying. His weight pinned her down, and his hand started pulling at her blouse. "No," Sophie had said clearly. "Stop. I don't want this." "Come on," Derek had slurred, not stopping. "You should be grateful. A girl like you, daughter of some biker trash, getting attention from someone like me? This is your lucky night." Sophie remembered Spike's self-defense lessons. She'd brought her knee up hard, connecting with Derek's groin with all the force her terror could produce. He'd fallen back, cursing, and Sophie had scrambled off the bed, unlocked the door, and run. She'd made it to the bathroom, locked herself inside, and called her father with shaking hands. Dragon had arrived 7 minutes later, breaking every speed limit. He'd found his daughter sitting on the front steps of the house, her blouse torn, her arms covered in bruises from where Derek had grabbed her. Dragon had wanted to storm into that house and drag Derek out. Sophie had stopped him. "No, Dad. We do this the right way. We call the police. We follow the law. That's what I want to do when I grow up. I need to believe the law works." So they'd called the police. They'd gone to the hospital for photographs and documentation of Sophie's injuries. They'd given statements. They'd pressed charges. Sophie had done everything right, everything by the book, everything the system was supposed to require. But what Sophie didn't know was that the officer who took their report made a phone call as soon as they left. To his boss. To Police Chief Robert Morrison. To Derek's father. And that phone call had started a chain of events that would lead to Judge Blackwell's courtroom. The case should have been straightforward. Sophie had evidence. Text messages from Derek the next day, sent before his father had taken away his phone, where he'd tried to apologize. "Sorry I got too aggressive last night. You're just really pretty and I had too much to drink. Can we keep this between us? My dad will kill me if this becomes a thing." Sophie had medical records showing fingerprint-shaped bruises on both arms, consistent with someone grabbing her forcefully. She had her torn blouse, carefully preserved in a paper bag. She had her testimony, clear and consistent through multiple interviews. Derek's defense was simple. He was drunk. He didn't remember clearly. Sophie had wanted to go upstairs with him. It was all a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by an overprotective father. The case was assigned to Judge Howard Blackwell's courtroom. At first, this seemed like a random assignment, just the normal rotation of cases through the court system. But Sophie's prosecutor, Jennifer Walsh, had grown suspicious during the discovery phase. Every motion the defense filed was granted. Every request the prosecution made was denied or delayed. Evidence that should have been ruled admissible was challenged and reconsidered. Derek remained free on his own recognizance despite the serious charges, while other defendants with less evidence against them sat in jail awaiting trial. Jennifer Walsh was a 15-year veteran of the district attorney's office. She'd handled hundreds of sexual assault cases. She knew the system, knew the judges, and knew when something wasn't right. 2 weeks before the trial, she'd called Dragon to her office. "Mr. Chen, I need to tell you something off the record," Jennifer had said carefully. "Judge Blackwell plays golf every Thursday with Chief Morrison. They're friends. I've asked for a different judge due to conflict of interest, but my motion was denied." Dragon's jaw had tightened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this trial might not be fair," Jennifer had admitted. "I'm going to fight as hard as I can for Sophie, but I need you to be prepared. The judge might not be impartial." "Then we get him removed," Dragon had said. "We've tried. He claims his friendship with the chief won't impact his judgment. The appellate court won't intervene before trial. We're stuck with him." Dragon had gone back to his club that night and explained the situation. The Devil's Disciples had their own lawyers, men who'd handled dozens of cases involving club members over the years. Everyone agreed. This was going to be ugly. But nobody, not even Dragon's most cynical brothers, predicted just how ugly Judge Blackwell would make it. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and cold wind. Sophie wore her school uniform, a white blouse, navy skirt, and blazer, because Jennifer Walsh had told her to look as young and innocent as possible. Not that Sophie needed help looking young. She was small for her age, barely 5 feet tall, with long dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Dragon wore his only suit, uncomfortable, but determined to look respectable. 3 of his club brothers came with him for support. Spike, the vice president, Hammer, the sergeant-at-arms, and Ghost, the road captain. They'd left their colors at home, wearing civilian clothes, trying not to give Judge Blackwell any excuse to be biased. But the minute they walked into the courtroom, they felt the hostility. Judge Blackwell's bailiff, a man named Stevens who'd been with him for 8 years, watched them with undisguised suspicion. Derek Morrison's lawyer, an expensive defense attorney named Gerald Foster, smirked when he saw Dragon's tattoos visible on his hands. The gallery was mostly empty. These proceedings weren't public in the traditional sense. Juvenile victims' cases were usually kept quiet. Just the immediate families, legal teams, and required court personnel. Judge Blackwell entered at exactly 9 a.m. He was imposing in his black robes, silver hair perfect, expression neutral and professional. He looked like Central Casting's version of a respectable judge. Nobody would guess what was about to happen. The morning moved through routine procedures. Jury selection had happened the previous week. Opening statements were brief. Jennifer Walsh laid out the prosecution's case clearly. Derek Morrison had physically assaulted Sophie Chen at a party. The evidence was substantial. Justice required accountability. Derek's lawyer, Gerald Foster, painted a different picture. A young man who'd made a mistake while intoxicated, a regrettable misunderstanding, and an overreaction from an aggressive father figure who belonged to a criminal motorcycle gang. Judge Blackwell showed no reaction to either statement. Professional, neutral, careful. Then Sophie was called to testify. She walked to the witness stand with her head high, just like Jennifer had coached her. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. She sat down, adjusted the microphone, and looked directly at the jury. Jennifer Walsh approached with a gentle smile. "Sophie, can you tell us what happened on the night of October 15th? Sophie took a breath and began. Her voice was quiet but clear. "I was at Madison Parker's Suite 16 party. Around 9 p.m. I needed to use the bathroom. Derek Morrison offered to show me where it was." "And did he take you to the bathroom?" Jennifer asked. "No, he took me to a bedroom at the end of the upstairs hallway." Sophie described everything. The locked door, Derek pushing her onto the bed, his hands on her clothes, her saying no multiple times. His comment about her being lucky that someone like him was interested in a daughter of biker trash, her using self-defense to escape. The jury listened intently. Several jurors looked at Derek with disgust. This was going well, Jennifer thought. Sophie was a compelling witness, clear and consistent. Then Gerald Foster stood up for cross-examination. "Miss Chen," he began smoothly, "you testified that you said no to my client. But isn't it true that you willingly went upstairs with him?" "He said he was taking me to the bathroom," Sophie replied firmly. "But you chose to follow him, correct? Nobody forced you up those stairs?" "Objection," Jennifer said, badgering the witness. "Overruled," Judge Blackwell said. His first intervention. "The witness can answer the question." Sophie felt the shift in the room. "I followed him because I trusted that he was helping me find the bathroom. That's not consent for anything else." Foster smiled. "You're a smart girl, aren't you, Sophie? Top of your class, I understand. Surely someone as intelligent as you would know the difference between a bathroom and a bedroom." "Objection," Jennifer said again. "Relevance?" "Overruled," Blackwell repeated. "I want to hear where this is going." Where it was going was exactly what Jennifer had feared. Foster spent 20 minutes trying to make Sophie look manipulative, suggesting she'd gone upstairs willingly and later regretted it, implying she'd made up the assault to explain torn clothing to her strict father. Sophie held her own, answering every question carefully and truthfully. But Judge Blackwell's interventions grew more frequent. Every time Jennifer objected, he overruled her. Every time Foster made an improper suggestion, Blackwell allowed it. Then Foster made his biggest mistake, or perhaps his most calculated move. "Miss Chen, your father is a member of a motorcycle gang, correct?" "Objection." Jennifer was on her feet. "The victim's father is not on trial here." "Your Honor, it goes to credibility," Foster argued. "This girl comes from a family involved in organized crime. That affects her truthfulness." Jennifer's face went red. "The Devil's Disciples are a registered motorcycle club, not a criminal organization. This is prejudicial and completely irrelevant to—" "I'll allow it," Judge Blackwell interrupted. His first hint of a smile appeared. "The witness will answer." Sophie looked at her father in the gallery. Dragon's hands were clenched into fists. She turned back to Foster. "My father is a member of a motorcycle club. He's an electrician. He's never been convicted of any crime. And none of that has anything to do with Derek Morrison assaulting me." "Doesn't it, though?" Foster pressed. "Growing up in that environment, around criminals and violence, wouldn't that make someone more comfortable with lying? More prone to manipulation?" "Objection!" Jennifer shouted. "This is outrageous!" Judge Blackwell leaned forward. And then he did the unthinkable. He laughed, not a quiet chuckle. A full, genuine laugh that echoed through the courtroom. "Mr. Foster, I think you've made your point," Blackwell said, still smiling. "Miss Chen, let me ask you directly. Do you understand what perjury means?" Sophie nodded, confused. "Yes, Your Honor. It means lying under oath." "That's correct. And you understand that people from your background, people raised around motorcycle gangs, might not have the same respect for truth and law that ordinary citizens do." The courtroom went silent. Jennifer Walsh stood frozen, unable to believe what she was hearing. The court reporter's hands paused over her keyboard. "Your Honor," Jennifer finally managed. "This is completely inappropriate. You're showing clear bias against the victim based on her father's legal association with—" "Counselor, I'm warning you," Blackwell interrupted. "Don't tell me how to run my courtroom." He turned back to Sophie, who was now visibly shaking. "Young lady, I've been on this bench for 12 years. I've seen hundreds of cases, and I've learned to spot certain patterns. Teenagers from troubled backgrounds often make up stories for attention. Girls who grow up around criminality learn to manipulate the system." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "I'm not making this up. Derek Morrison assaulted me. I have evidence." "Evidence can be manufactured," Blackwell said dismissively. "Text messages can be faked. Bruises can come from anywhere. What I see sitting before me is a 14-year-old girl from a criminal family, trying to ruin the reputation of a police chief's son who made one mistake while intoxicated." "Your Honor, I must object," Jennifer said, her voice shaking with rage. "This is the most biased, prejudicial—" "Sit down, Ms. Walsh, or I'll hold you in contempt." Dragon stood up in the gallery. You can't talk to my daughter like that. Judge Blackwell's gavel slammed down. Sir, you will sit down immediately, or I will have you removed from this courtroom and charged with contempt. Spike pulled Dragon back down. Not yet, he whispered urgently. Not here. We handle this differently. Sophie was openly crying now. The jury looked uncomfortable. Even Gerald Foster seemed surprised by how far the judge was going. But Judge Blackwell wasn't finished. He leaned back in his chair, looked at Sophie with open contempt, and said the words that would end his career. Miss Chen, I'm going to be frank with you. You're a biker brat looking for attention. Your testimony is unreliable, your evidence is questionable, and your credibility is destroyed by your family background. I don't believe a word you've said. He turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm declaring a mistrial. This case is dismissed due to insufficient evidence and the unreliable nature of the alleged victim's testimony. The gavel came down. Final. Absolute. Derek Morrison smiled. Chief Morrison, sitting in the back row, nodded with satisfaction. Gerald Foster closed his briefcase, already thinking about his golf game that afternoon. Sophie collapsed forward, sobbing. Jennifer Walsh stood motionless, her entire career's worth of cases flashing through her mind. She'd never seen anything like this, never witnessed such open, flagrant bias from a sitting judge. Dragon tried to move toward his daughter, but the bailiff blocked his path. Sir, I need you to leave the courtroom now. That's my daughter. Now, sir. The Three Devils Disciples members surrounded Dragon, moving him toward the door before something violent happened. Spike caught Jennifer Walsh's eye. She nodded slightly. They'd talk outside. As they left, they could hear Derek Morrison and his father laughing, celebrating, planning to go out for steaks to commemorate Derek's freedom. Judge Blackwell retired to his chambers, poured himself a whiskey, even though it was only 10:30 a.m., and called Chief Morrison. Bobby, you owe me one, Blackwell said into the phone. Already planning your next tea time, Morrison replied. Thanks, Howard. That biker girl had my boy worried. Please, Blackwell scoffed. I've handled bigger problems than some motorcycle trash. The girl learned her place today. Case closed. But what Judge Howard Blackwell didn't know was that his courtroom had been equipped with new audio recording equipment just 3 weeks earlier. Every word he'd said was being recorded, saved, and backed up to a secure server. And what he really didn't know was that Dragon's phone call from the courthouse steps would reach 300 bikers in less than 2 hours. The case wasn't closed. It was just beginning. Sophie collapsed in the courthouse hallway, her body racked with sobs that came from somewhere deep and primal. This wasn't crying. This was the sound of a 14-year-old girl's faith in justice shattering into 1,000 pieces. Dragon knelt beside his daughter, pulling her into his arms while his own tears fell silently. I'm so sorry, baby girl. I'm so sorry. He didn't believe me, Sophie gasped between sobs. I told the truth and he didn't believe me. Because of you. Because you're a biker, he didn't believe me. Those words cut Dragon deeper than any knife could. No, baby, this isn't because of me. This is because that judge is corrupt. This is because the system failed you. You said the law would work, Sophie cried. You said if we did everything right, justice would happen. You lied. Jennifer Walsh knelt down on Sophie's other side, her own eyes red. Sophie, listen to me. That wasn't justice in there. That was a corrupt judge protecting his friend's son. What happened in that courtroom was illegal, unethical, and we're going to fight it. How? Sophie asked. He's a judge. He can do whatever he wants. No, Jennifer said firmly. He can't. I've been a prosecutor for 15 years, and I have never ever seen anything like what just happened. Judge Blackwell crossed every line. He showed clear bias, made prejudicial statements, and dismissed a case without legal justification. We have grounds for appeal, grounds for a judicial complaint, and... It won't matter, Sophie interrupted. Derek won. He gets to walk away, and everyone will know he got away with it because his dad is the police chief. And everyone will know I'm the biker's daughter who made up lies for attention. Spike, who'd been watching the hallway for security, spoke up quietly. Little Dragon, I need you to listen to me. Your dad taught you to be strong. Your mom, before she passed, she taught you to never give up. Right now feels like the end, but it's not. We're going to make this right." "How?" Sophie demanded, anger breaking through her tears. "You going to beat up the judge? Go to his house and threaten him? That's what everyone expects bikers to do, right? That'll just prove he was right about us." Dragon closed his eyes. His daughter was breaking, and he didn't know how to fix this. Hammer, the largest of the three bikers, surprised everyone by speaking. He rarely talked, preferring action to words. "Little Dragon, do you remember when you were 8 years old and Tommy Martinez stole your science fair project?" Sophie looked up, confused by the apparent change of subject. "What?" "You remember?" Hammer continued. "That kid took your volcano model, said it was his, and won second place. You were so angry you wanted to knock his teeth out." "I remember," Sophie whispered. "And what did you do instead?" I proved it was mine. I had photos of me building it. I had the research notebook with my handwriting. I took it to the principal and showed her the truth." "And what happened?" "Tommy got disqualified. I got my ribbon. He got suspended." Hammer nodded. "You won because you proved the truth. Not with violence, with evidence, with persistence, with witnesses who backed you up." "This is different," Sophie protested. "No, it's not," Ghost, the road captain, said. "It's bigger, but it's the same principle. That judge thinks he's untouchable. He thinks nobody will challenge him. We're going to prove he's wrong." Dragon looked up at his brothers, then at Jennifer Walsh. "What do we need to do?" Jennifer pulled out her phone. "First, I'm calling my boss. District Attorney Martinez needs to know what happened in that courtroom. Then I'm filing an emergency appeal and a complaint with the State Judicial Commission." "Will that work?" Dragon asked. "Honestly, I don't know. Judge Blackwell has connections, but what he did today was so egregious, so clearly wrong, that it can't be ignored." Spike pulled out his own phone. "I'm making some calls too." "To who?" Jennifer asked, concerned. "Every motorcycle club in the state. What Judge Blackwell did today didn't just affect Sophie. He insulted every single person who rides. He said we're all criminals, all liars, all trash. That doesn't stand." Jennifer held up her hand. "I understand you're angry, but any violence, any threats, anything illegal will only make this worse. It'll prove his bias was justified." "We're not planning violence," Spike said calmly. "We're planning something much more effective." Dragon looked at him. "What?" "You'll see tomorrow morning," Spike said, already dialing. "Trust me, brother. We're going to make Judge Howard Blackwell wish he'd never heard Sophie's name." Spike stepped outside the courthouse to make his calls. The first was to Reaper, president of the Hells Angels North Valley chapter. They'd known each other for 20 years, since before either of them wore a patch. "Reaper, it's Spike. I need to tell you something that happened today." He explained everything. The trial, Sophie's testimony, Derek Morrison, and most importantly, Judge Blackwell's words, "biker brat," and his statement that anyone from motorcycle club families were criminals and liars. Reaper listened in silence. Then, "What's the judge's name again?" "Howard Blackwell, Department 7, Superior Court." "And he actually said motorcycle club members' families are criminals? In open court? While dismissing a 14-year-old sexual assault victim's case?" "Every word. The court reporter has it all on record." Reaper was quiet for a moment. "How many can you bring tomorrow morning?" 20, maybe 30 from our club. "I'll have 50 there by 9 a.m., and I'm calling the other chapters. This judge needs to learn something." "No violence," Spike emphasized. The prosecutor was clear. Anything illegal hurts Sophie's appeal. "Oh, I'm not planning violence," Reaper said, and Spike could hear the cold smile in his voice. "I'm planning something much worse for a corrupt judge. I'm planning accountability." The second call was to Iron Mike, president of the Mongols East Side chapter. The third was to Thunder, who led the Outlaws. Fourth was to Diesel, head of the Banditos region. The message was always the same. A judge had dismissed a sexual assault case against a police chief's son. He'd done it by declaring that anyone associated with motorcycle clubs were criminals whose testimony couldn't be trusted. He'd mocked a 14-year-old girl in open court and laughed at her. And every single president had the same response. "How many do you need?" By 6 p.m. that evening, Spike had confirmations from 12 different motorcycle clubs. Not rival clubs competing for territory. United clubs with a common purpose. "We'll have at least 100, Spike told Dragon that night. Maybe more. They were sitting in the Devil's Disciples clubhouse. Sophie upstairs sleeping after crying herself into exhaustion. Jennifer Walsh was there too, working on her laptop, preparing the appeal documents. 100 bikers doing what? Dragon asked. Attending court tomorrow, Spike said simply. Jennifer looked up sharply. What? Judge Blackwell has a full docket tomorrow, regular Tuesday morning cases. We're going to fill every seat in his courtroom gallery and watch him work. That's it? Jennifer asked. Just sitting there? That's it, Spike confirmed. We're citizens. We have every right to observe court proceedings. We're going to exercise that right. Dragon understood immediately. He won't be able to show bias with 100 bikers watching his every move. Exactly, Spike said. And if he tries to have us removed, we'll make sure every news outlet in the state knows that Judge Blackwell doesn't want witnesses to his courtroom decisions. Jennifer thought about this carefully. It's brilliant, completely legal, incredibly effective, and it sends a clear message without any violence or threats. That's the idea, Spike said. We're going to remind Judge Howard Blackwell that his courtroom is a public space, that his decisions are public record, and that he's not as untouchable as he thinks. Ghost spoke up from the corner. What about Derek Morrison? Everyone turned to look at him. He's still walking around free, Ghost continued. Still bragging about getting away with it. I heard he posted on social media tonight, making jokes about the trial. Dragon's jaw clenched. What did he say? I'll show you. Ghost pulled out his phone and navigated to Derek's Instagram. There was a post from 2 hours ago, a photo of Derek holding a beer, with the caption, "When the judge agrees you're innocent, biker trash tried to come for me and got shut down. Warm winning Darius daddy's boy, untouchable." The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. No, Jennifer said immediately. Whatever you're thinking, don't. That's exactly what they want. Any violence against Derek proves the judge was right about motorcycle club members being criminals. So he just gets to mock Sophie? Dragon demanded. No, Jennifer said. He gets to hang himself with his own arrogance. That post proves consciousness of guilt. It shows he knew exactly what he did and he's celebrating getting away with it. I'm screenshotting this and adding it to our appeal. Hammer leaned forward. What about a restraining order? Can we get one to keep him away from Sophie? The case was dismissed, Jennifer explained. Without a criminal conviction, it's harder to get a restraining order. But I'll file for one anyway. The evidence is strong, even if Blackwell ignored it. This is broken, Dragon said quietly. The whole system is broken. Parts of it are, Jennifer agreed. But not all of it. The Judicial Commission takes complaints seriously, especially against judges who show clear bias. The appellate court doesn't like seeing cases dismissed for improper reasons, and the court of public opinion is powerful. She closed her laptop. What happened today was shocking, but it was also so egregious that it can't be swept under the rug. Judge Blackwell overplayed his hand. He thought his connections would protect him. Tomorrow, we start proving he was wrong. Upstairs, Sophie couldn't sleep despite her exhaustion. She could hear the low murmur of voices from below. She pulled out her phone and looked at Derek's Instagram post. The anger that flooded through her was clarifying. She opened her notes app and started writing. Not for school, not for college applications, for herself. Today a judge told me I wasn't worth believing because of who my father is. He laughed at me. He mocked me. He let my attacker walk free. But here's what Judge Blackwell doesn't understand. He didn't break me. He made me angry. And I'm going to channel that anger into something productive. I'm still going to be a lawyer. I'm still going to fight for justice. But now I know exactly why I need to. Because the system that's supposed to protect people like me is broken, and someone needs to fix it. Today I learned that judges can be corrupt. Tomorrow, I'm going to start learning how to hold them accountable. She saved the note, dated it, and closed her phone. Then she got out of bed and walked downstairs. Everyone looked up in surprise when Sophie appeared in the clubhouse main room. I thought you were asleep, Dragon said. I can't sleep, Sophie replied. I heard you talking about tomorrow, about filling the courtroom. Spike nodded. That's the plan, little dragon. Show Judge Blackwell that people are watching. I want to be there, Sophie said. Baby, you don't need to, Dragon started. Yes, I do, Sophie interrupted firmly. He thinks he broke me today. He thinks I'm going to hide and cry and give up. I need to show him he's wrong. I need to see him realize that what he did has consequences." Jennifer studied the young girl carefully. "Sophie, it might be difficult to watch. Seeing the judge continue with his work like nothing happened will make me stronger," Sophie finished. "Ms. Walsh, you said the appellate court doesn't like cases dismissed for improper reasons. Well, I need to see this through. I need to be there when he realizes he made a mistake." Dragon looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure, Dad. You taught me to never back down from bullies. Judge Blackwell is just a bully with a fancy robe." Tuesday morning began at 6 a.m. at the Devil's Disciples Clubhouse. The parking lot started filling with motorcycles as the sun rose. Chrome gleamed in the early light. Engines rumbled like thunder. But this wasn't a normal club meeting. Bikers from different clubs, different territories, different patches were arriving and greeting each other with respect. The Hells Angels pulled in first, 50 strong, led by Reaper on his black Harley. The Mongols arrived 10 minutes later, 30 members. Then the Outlaws, the Banditos, and smaller independent clubs. By 7:30 a.m., there were over 100 motorcycles in the parking lot. Inside the clubhouse, the presidents held a brief meeting. "Rules for today," Reaper announced. "No colors on anyone with warrants or active cases. We can't give the judge any excuse to have people arrested. Everyone else wears their cuts with pride. No weapons," Diesel from the Banditos added. "They'll have metal detectors at the courthouse. Leave everything at home or in your bikes." "No talking in the courtroom unless asked a direct question," Thunder from the Outlaws continued. "No threats, no intimidation, no giving the judge any reason to claim we're disrupting proceedings. And most importantly," Spike said, "we're there as citizens exercising our constitutional right to observe public court proceedings. We're not there as clubs. We're there as individuals who care about justice." Iron Mike from the Mongols raised his hand. "What if the judge tries to clear the courtroom?" "He won't have legal grounds," Jennifer Walsh said. She'd arrived at 7 a.m. to brief everyone on courtroom procedure. "As long as you're quiet and respectful, you have every right to be there. If he tries to remove you without cause, that becomes another item for the judicial complaint." Dragon stood up. "I want to say something to everyone here. You don't know my daughter. Most of you have never met Sophie. But you're all taking a day off work, riding across the state to stand up for her. I don't have words for what that means." Reaper clasped his shoulder. "Your daughter is one of ours, because her father is one of us. When a judge says motorcycle club families are criminals and liars, he's attacking all of us. This isn't just about Sophie. It's about every biker's kid, every biker's wife, every person connected to our community. Judge Blackwell declared war on us yesterday. Today, we respond." At 8 a.m., the procession began. Over 100 motorcycles left the clubhouse in formation. They rode legally, obeying every traffic law, maintaining proper spacing. Police officers along the route watched in amazement as the massive group passed. Several cops recognized what was happening and nodded in respect. The courthouse parking lot didn't have space for 100 motorcycles. The bikers parked in a nearby public lot and walked the 3 blocks to the courthouse in groups. They didn't march in formation or try to intimidate anyone. They just walked, wearing their leather and their patches, heading toward the same destination. Security at the courthouse was overwhelmed. The metal detectors backed up as over 100 bikers emptied their pockets, removed their belts, and submitted to searches. Every single one cooperated fully, thanking the security officers politely. The courthouse administrator, a woman named Patricia Chen, no relation to Sophie, called Judge Blackwell's chambers at 8:35 a.m. "Judge Blackwell, you need to know that approximately 120 bikers are currently going through security. They're all heading to Department 7. There was silence on the line. Then, "What do you mean heading to Department 7? "Your courtroom, sir. They're all requesting to observe your proceedings this morning." "This is intimidation," Blackwell said immediately. "I want security to turn them away." "On what grounds, sir? They have a legal right to observe public court proceedings. They're not being disruptive. They're actually being remarkably polite." "I don't care. I won't have my courtroom turned into a circus." Patricia Chen had worked in the courthouse for 22 years. She'd seen judges come and go. She knew when something significant was happening. "Sir, with respect, If you deny them access without legal justification, you'll create a much bigger problem. I recommend you allow them to observe. Your courtroom holds approximately 150 people in the gallery. They'll fit." Judge Blackwell slammed down the phone. He immediately called Chief Morrison. "Bobby, I've got a situation. About 100 bikers are trying to flood my courtroom." "So arrest them," Morrison said. "For what? They haven't broken any laws. They're just showing up." Chief Morrison understood immediately. This was about yesterday's trial. "It's intimidation, Howard. They're trying to scare you." "It's working," Blackwell admitted. "I need help here. I'll send officers to the courthouse, but Howard, you can't show weakness. If you let these thugs dictate how you run your courtroom, you're finished." Judge Blackwell hung up and poured himself a whiskey, even though it was only 8:45 in the morning. His hands were shaking. At 8:55 a.m., Judge Howard Blackwell walked from his chambers toward his courtroom. The hallway was lined with bikers. They didn't block his path. They didn't say anything. They just watched him walk past. Blackwell felt their eyes on him like physical weight. He'd sent men to prison. He'd faced angry defendants and hostile witnesses. But he'd never felt anything like this silent, focused attention from over 100 people who knew exactly what he'd done. He pushed open the courtroom doors and stopped. Every single seat in the gallery was filled with bikers. Men and women in leather vests, their club patches visible, their faces neutral. They sat in perfect silence, hands folded, watching the front of the courtroom. More stood along the walls where standing was permitted. The bailiff, Stevens, looked overwhelmed and uncertain. In the front row, directly behind the prosecutor's table, sat Sophie Chen. She wore her school uniform again. Her father sat beside her, and on her other side was Jennifer Walsh. Judge Blackwell's eyes met Sophie's. The 14-year-old girl didn't look away, didn't cry, just stared at him with calm, steady determination. "Your Honor," Stevens approached quickly. "I wasn't sure what to do. They all came in properly, went through security, and took seats. They're not breaking any rules." Blackwell scanned the room again. This was intimidation. It had to be. But technically, legally, they were just citizens observing court proceedings. "Court will come to order," Blackwell said, his voice not quite steady. Everyone stood as he took the bench. Everyone sat when he did. Perfect courtroom protocol. "I see we have observers today," Blackwell said. "I want to make it clear that any disruption will result in immediate removal and contempt charges." Silence. Not one person moved or spoke. Reaper, sitting in the second row, simply nodded once. Message received. Blackwell looked at his docket for the day. 10 cases. Routine matters. A DUI sentencing, a preliminary hearing for a theft case, a motion hearing for a domestic violence restraining order, and other standard items. He'd handled thousands of cases just like these, but never with 100 bikers watching his every move. "Bailiff, call the first case. People versus Martinez, sentencing for DUI." A nervous young man approached with his public defender. Jose Martinez, 23 years old, first offense DUI. He'd been convicted 2 months ago and today was sentencing. The public defender, a tired-looking woman named Susan Chen, made her argument. "Your Honor, Mr. Martinez has completed alcohol counseling, attended all required meetings, and maintained employment. We request probation with community service rather than jail time." The prosecutor didn't object strongly. First offense, no injuries, cooperative defendant. Standard procedure would be probation. Judge Blackwell looked at Jose Martinez, then at the 100 bikers watching him, then back at Martinez. Every decision he made today would be witnessed, documented, remembered. "Mr. Martinez," Blackwell said, "a DUI is a serious offense. You endangered lives by driving under the influence." Jose nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I know. I'm so sorry. It won't happen again." Normally, Blackwell might have used this opportunity to grandstand, to lecture, to show his authority. But with 100 pairs of eyes watching, he simply said, "Probation for 2 years, community service, continued counseling, and license suspension for 6 months. Don't appear before me again, Mr. Martinez." "Thank you, Your Honor. Fair. Reasonable. By the book. Exactly what the law called for." The second case was called, a preliminary hearing for theft charges. The defense attorney argued there wasn't probable cause for the charges to proceed. The prosecutor presented evidence. Both sides made their arguments. Judge Blackwell listened carefully, took notes, and ruled fairly based on the evidence. Probable cause existed. The case would proceed to trial. No bias, no favoritism, no corrupt manipulation of the law. Case after case, Judge Blackwell followed proper procedure. He was professional, impartial, and fair in every ruling. It was, ironically, the best work he'd done in years. Because he knew that every word, every decision, every facial expression was being observed by people who would notice any deviation from proper judicial conduct. The morning break came at 10:30 a.m. Judge Blackwell fled to his chambers. His shirt was soaked with sweat despite the air conditioning. Chief Morrison called. "How's it going?" "They're just sitting there," Blackwell said. "Not talking, not moving, just watching. It's psychological warfare." "So remove them." "On what grounds, Bobby?" "They're following every rule. If I remove them for simply observing public proceedings, I'll have the ACLU and every civil rights organization in the country filing lawsuits. Not to mention, it'll make the judicial complaint against me even stronger." "There's a judicial complaint?" Blackwell's blood ran cold. He'd forgotten that Morrison didn't know. "Jennifer Walsh filed yesterday afternoon, claims I showed bias in the Chen case." "That's ridiculous. You were just doing your job." "Was I?" Blackwell asked quietly. "What do you mean?" "Bobby, I called a 14-year-old girl biker brat in open court. I laughed at her testimony. I dismissed her case because of her father's club membership. It's all on the court recording." Morrison was silent for a long moment. "We'll handle it. You have friends. The complaint won't go anywhere." But Blackwell wasn't so sure anymore. Not with 100 bikers ensuring his every move from now on would be scrutinized. The afternoon session was more of the same. Cases proceeded fairly. Rulings were made by the book. Judge Blackwell showed no bias, no favoritism, no corruption. It was exhausting. Following the actual law, listening to both sides, making decisions based on evidence rather than personal relationships or prejudice. This was what he was supposed to do every day, but he'd grown so accustomed to bending rules for friends that proper judicial conduct felt foreign. At 3:45 p.m., the last case concluded. Judge Blackwell looked out at the gallery. The bikers hadn't moved all day except for the brief lunch recess. They'd sat in absolute silence, perfect behavior, zero disruption. "Court is adjourned," Blackwell announced. Everyone stood as he left the bench. As he walked toward his chambers, he heard something that made him pause. Applause. Slow, methodical clapping. Not mocking, not threatening, just acknowledgement. He turned to see Reaper standing, clapping slowly. Then another biker joined, and another. Within seconds, all 100 bikers were giving him a standing ovation for doing his job correctly, for following the law, for being the judge he was supposed to be. The message was crystal clear. We know what you're capable of when you choose to be fair. We'll be watching to ensure you keep choosing fairness. Blackwell fled to his chambers and locked the door. Outside the courthouse, Sophie stood on the steps while bikers filed past. Many stopped to speak to her. "You're brave, little sister," one Hell's Angel said. "Don't ever forget that." "Your testimony took courage," a Mongol member told her. "We heard about it. You spoke truth even when it was hard." "Keep being strong," a Bandidos member added. "You're going to be an amazing lawyer someday." Sophie felt tears building, but this time they weren't from sadness or humiliation. They were from overwhelming gratitude. Reaper approached last. He knelt down to her level. "Miss Chen, my name is Reaper. I'm the Hells Angels chapter president. I want you to know something." Sophie looked at this massive, intimidating man with his leather vest and weathered face. "What Judge Blackwell did yesterday was wrong. He violated your rights and he insulted you based on prejudice. But he did something else too, something he didn't intend." "What?" Sophie asked. "He united every motorcycle club in this region. We don't always agree on things. We have our differences. But what he said about motorcycle club families being criminals and liars, that attacked all of us. You gave us a common purpose." "I didn't mean to." "You didn't do anything wrong," Reaper interrupted gently. "You told the truth. You stood up for yourself. That judge tried to silence you and shame you. Instead, he gave you an army. He stood up and looked at Dragon. We'll be here every day until this is resolved. Every court appearance, every hearing, every proceeding related to your daughter's case. The judge wanted to dismiss her. We're going to make sure she can't be dismissed ever again. That evening, the video started spreading. Someone had recorded the bikers entering the courthouse, filling the courtroom, sitting in absolute silence while Judge Blackwell worked. The footage showed Sophie in the front row, flanked by her father and prosecutor, while over 100 bikers demonstrated perfect courtroom decorum. A legal blogger named Tom Winters posted an article. Bikers stage silent protest after judge mocks assault victim. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times. The article included excerpts from the court transcript of Sophie's trial. Blackwell's exact words, his laughter, his dismissal of her case based solely on her father's club membership. The comment sections exploded. This judge should be disbarred immediately. What happened to equal protection under law? That poor girl. She was brave enough to testify and the judge mocked her. The bikers handled this perfectly. No violence, just making sure they're watching. By Wednesday morning, the story had been picked up by mainstream news outlets. Local TV stations sent reporters to the courthouse. National news websites ran stories about judicial bias and motorcycle clubs uniting for justice. Judge Blackwell arrived at the courthouse at 8:45 a.m. to find news cameras waiting. He pushed past reporters without comment. Inside, the gallery was filled with bikers again. More than yesterday. Some had traveled from neighboring states overnight, and sitting in the front row was Sophie Chen, her school uniform crisp, her bearing dignified, her eyes steady. The Judicial Commission contacted Blackwell's attorney at 10 a.m. The complaint against him had received over 5,000 additional supporting letters. From lawyers, from advocacy groups, from ordinary citizens who'd read about Sophie's case. Howard, this is serious, his attorney warned. The commission can't ignore this level of public attention. They're going to investigate thoroughly. They're friends of mine, Blackwell protested. We're friends of mine, the attorney corrected. Nobody wants to be associated with this right now. The optics are terrible. A judge mocking a teenage assault victim, dismissing her case because her father rides a motorcycle. This isn't defendable. By Thursday, the bikers had maintained their presence for 3 straight days. Over 200 bikers had cycled through the courthouse, each one taking a turn to observe Judge Blackwell's courtroom. His rulings remained fair, his conduct professional. But the damage was already done. The State Bar Association announced they were reviewing the case. The appellate court had received Jennifer Walsh's emergency appeal and scheduled an expedited hearing. The district attorney, under pressure from victims' rights groups, announced a review of all cases Judge Blackwell had dismissed in the past 5 years. Derek Morrison's social media became a liability. Screenshots of his biker trash post were included in the appeal documents. His bragging about being untouchable because of his father was entered as evidence of consciousness of guilt. Chief Morrison called Blackwell on Thursday afternoon. Howard, I need you to understand something. My position is becoming untenable. The mayor is getting calls. The city council is asking questions. I can't protect you anymore. Bobby, we've been friends for 20 years. And I'm grateful for that friendship. But my son is about to be recharged because your courtroom has become a circus. People are investigating me now because of our golf games and our friendship. I need distance from this situation. The betrayal was complete. Blackwell had sacrificed his integrity to help Morrison's son, and Morrison was abandoning him. Friday morning brought the largest crowd yet. 300 bikers couldn't fit in the courtroom, so they filled the hallways, the lobby, and the courthouse steps. They remained peaceful, silent, and omnipresent. Sophie didn't attend Friday. She'd gone back to school trying to maintain some normalcy, but her absence didn't matter. The bikers stayed. At 2:30 p.m. on Friday afternoon, Judge Howard Blackwell called his attorney. I'm going to resign. What? I'm done. I can't do this anymore. The commission is going to remove me anyway. At least if I resign, I might keep my pension. Howard, think about this. I have thought about it. Every day this week while hundreds of bikers watch my every move, while news cameras wait outside, while my reputation gets destroyed piece by piece. It's over. He drafted the resignation letter that evening, effective immediately. citing health concerns and a desire to spend more time with family. Standard political language for disgrace. But before he could submit it, he received a visit at home. Sophie Chen and her father stood on his doorstep at 7 p.m. Friday evening. "What are you doing here?" Blackwell demanded through the screen door. "We need to talk," Sophie said calmly. "Please." Against his better judgment, Blackwell opened the door. They came into his living room, this broken judge and the girl he'd tried to break. "I heard you're resigning," Sophie said. "How did you—" "Word travels fast," Dragon interrupted, "especially when courthouse staff are sick of corrupt judges." Blackwell sank into his chair. "What do you want? To gloat? To see the mighty judge brought low by a little girl and her biker army?" "No," Sophie said. "I want to understand why." "Why what? Why did you do it? Why did you laugh at me? Why did you dismiss my case when you knew Derek Morrison was guilty?" Blackwell was silent for a long moment. Then, perhaps because he had nothing left to lose, he told the truth. "Because Bobby Morrison is my friend. Because I've been dismissing charges and bending rules for friends for years. Because I could. Because nobody ever called me on it before." "Did you know you were wrong?" Sophie asked. "Of course I knew. I've been a judge for 12 years. I know the law. I just didn't care." "Why not?" Blackwell looked at this 14-year-old girl who was asking better questions than most attorneys. "Because I forgot what I was supposed to be. I became someone who served power instead of justice. And yesterday I was willing to destroy a child to protect a friend's guilty son." Sophie nodded slowly. "Do you know what you did to me? I humiliated you, dismissed your trauma, made you feel worthless. Yes, all of that. But you also taught me something important." "What?" "That the system doesn't work on its own, that judges can be corrupt, that laws on paper mean nothing if the people enforcing them are compromised. You taught me why I need to become a lawyer, not just to argue cases, but to hold judges like you accountable." Blackwell felt those words like a physical blow. "I'm going to accept your resignation," Sophie continued, "on one condition. You're 14, you can't set conditions." "Actually, I can, because if you don't agree, my father's friends will ensure you're in that courthouse every single day until the Judicial Commission removes you. And that process could take months." Dragon smiled slightly. "She's got your number, Judge." "What's your condition?" Blackwell asked. "I want you to write a public statement, a real one, not the health concerns excuse. I want you to admit what you did wrong. I want you to acknowledge that you showed bias against me because of my father. I want you to say that every case you dismissed deserves review, and I want you to apologize." After the sentencing, reporters crowded around Sophie on the courthouse steps. She made a brief statement. "I'm grateful for the jury's verdict. I'm grateful for Judge Santos's fairness. And I'm grateful for every person who stood up for me when the system failed. This shouldn't have been this hard. A 14-year-old assault victim shouldn't need an army of bikers to ensure justice, but I'm glad they were there when I needed them." A reporter asked, "What would you say to other young people who face similar situations?" Sophie thought carefully. "I'd say that the system doesn't always work the first time. Sometimes you have to fight. Sometimes you have to appeal. Sometimes you need people who believe you standing beside you. And never, ever let someone tell you that your truth doesn't matter because of who your family is or where you come from." Another reporter, "What about Judge Blackwell? Do you forgive him?" "Forgiveness is complicated," Sophie said. "He apologized and accepted responsibility. That matters. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. I'll always remember what he did. I'll use that memory to motivate me to become the kind of lawyer who holds judges accountable." The fallout from Sophie's case rippled through the justice system for months. Judge Blackwell's statement led to a review of 127 cases he'd handled. 17 were found to have serious irregularities. 8 convictions were overturned. 4 dismissed cases were reopened. 3 civil judgments were reversed. Blackwell lost his law license permanently. His pension was reduced. His marriage ended when his wife learned the extent of his corruption. He moved to another state, working as a legal consultant for a firm that didn't know his full history. Chief Robert Morrison was forced into early retirement. The investigation into his department revealed patterns of protecting family members and friends from prosecution. 3 other officers were disciplined for similar misconduct. Derek Morrison served his full sentence. In juvenile detention, he was no longer the untouchable police chief's son. He was just another inmate. The experience changed him, though whether it was genuine growth or learned caution remained unclear. The state implemented new protocols for judicial oversight. Courtrooms were equipped with better recording equipment. Complaints against judges received more scrutiny, and a new program allowed citizens to observe trials and report concerns directly to the Judicial Commission. The program was named the Chen Transparency Initiative in Sophie's honor. The motorcycle clubs who'd united for Sophie's case formed a lasting alliance. They created the Courtroom Watch program, where members would attend trials involving assault victims, domestic violence cases, and any proceeding where vulnerable people might be intimidated or dismissed. Their presence changed dynamics. Judges knew they were being watched. Prosecutors took cases more seriously. Defense attorneys couldn't rely on judicial bias to win cases. Critics called it intimidation. Supporters called it accountability. Either way, it worked. After the sentencing, reporters crowded around Sophie on the courthouse steps. She made a brief statement. "I'm grateful for the jury's verdict. I'm grateful for Judge Santos's fairness. And I'm grateful for every person who stood up for me when the system failed. This shouldn't have been this hard. A 14-year-old assault victim shouldn't need an army of bikers to ensure justice, but I'm glad they were there when I needed them." A reporter asked, "What would you say to other young people who face similar situations?" Sophie thought carefully. "I'd say that the system doesn't always work the first time. Sometimes you have to fight. Sometimes you have to appeal. Sometimes you need people who believe you standing beside you. And never, ever let someone tell you that your truth doesn't matter because of who your family is or where you come from." Another reporter, "What about Judge Blackwell? Do you forgive him?" "Forgiveness is complicated," Sophie said. "He apologized and accepted responsibility. That matters. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. I'll always remember what he did. I'll use that memory to motivate me to become the kind of lawyer who holds judges accountable." The fallout from Sophie's case rippled through the justice system for months. Judge Blackwell's statement led to a review of 127 cases he'd handled. 17 were found to have serious irregularities. 8 convictions were overturned. 4 dismissed cases were reopened. 3 civil judgments were reversed. Blackwell lost his law license permanently. His pension was reduced. His marriage ended when his wife learned the extent of his corruption. He moved to another state, working as a legal consultant for a firm that didn't know his full history. Chief Robert Morrison was forced into early retirement. The investigation into his department revealed patterns of protecting family members and friends from prosecution. 3 other officers were disciplined for similar misconduct. Derek Morrison served his full sentence. In juvenile detention, he was no longer the untouchable police chief's son. He was just another inmate. The experience changed him, though whether it was genuine growth or learned caution remained unclear. The state implemented new protocols for judicial oversight. Courtrooms were equipped with better recording equipment. Complaints against judges received more scrutiny, and a new program allowed citizens to observe trials and report concerns directly to the Judicial Commission. The program was named the Chen Transparency Initiative in Sophie's honor. The motorcycle clubs who'd united for Sophie's case formed a lasting alliance. They created the Courtroom Watch program, where members would attend trials involving assault victims, domestic violence cases, and any proceeding where vulnerable people might be intimidated or dismissed. Their presence changed dynamics. Judges knew they were being watched. Prosecutors took cases more seriously. Defense attorneys couldn't rely on judicial bias to win cases. Critics called it intimidation. Supporters called it accountability. Either way, it worked. Sophie Chen, age 32, was appointed as a judge to the Superior Court. The first person to call and congratulate her was Reaper, now retired from the Hells Angels but still actively involved in the Courtroom Watch program. "Little dragon," he said warmly, "you did it. You're going to be the judge you needed when you were 14. "I'm going to try," Sophie promised. "Every day I'm going to remember what it felt like to be dismissed. And I'm going to make sure no victim in my courtroom ever feels that way." Her first day on the bench, Sophie walked into Department 7, the same courtroom where Howard Blackwell had mocked her. It had been renovated, updated with new technology, but the bones were the same. The gallery had about 30 bikers scattered throughout. Dragon sat in the front row. The Courtroom Watch program had made it tradition to attend the first day of any new judge, especially judges they'd helped create. Sophie looked out at her courtroom and remembered 14-year-old Sophie, terrified and humiliated, listening to a corrupt judge laugh at her trauma. Then she looked at the attorneys waiting for her first cases, at the defendants who would appear before her, at the victims who would testify in her courtroom. "Court is now in session," she announced. "Everyone deserves justice in this courtroom. Everyone deserves respect. Everyone deserves to be heard. That's not a promise. It's a guarantee." The bikers in the gallery smiled. Little Dragon had grown up to be exactly what she'd promised. A guardian of justice, a protector of the vulnerable, a judge who remembered what it was like to be dismissed and who would spend her career ensuring nobody else felt that way. Howard Blackwell read about Sophie's appointment in the newspaper. He was 70 years old now, living in Florida, far from the state where he'd once wielded power. He kept the article, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. He'd tried to destroy a 14-year-old girl because of his friendship with a corrupt police chief. Instead, he'd created his opposite, a judge who valued justice over connections, fairness over favoritism, and victims over powerful friends. In his retirement, Blackwell sometimes spoke to law students about judicial ethics. He told his story honestly, shamefully, about the day he mocked an assault victim and 100 bikers made him realize he'd become the very corruption he'd sworn to prevent. "I destroyed my career, my reputation, and nearly destroyed an innocent girl," he would tell the students. "But she survived. She thrived. And she became the judge I should have been. Let that be my legacy. Not my corruption, but the excellence of the person who rose above my failures." Sophie never spoke to Blackwell again after that night in his living room. She didn't need to. She'd said what needed saying. He'd acknowledged his failures. That was enough. Instead, she focused on her work, on being fair to every person who appeared in her courtroom, on remembering that behind every case file was a human being deserving of dignity. And on the days when decisions were difficult, when the law seemed unclear or justice seemed impossible, Sophie would look at the small photograph on her bench. It showed a 14-year-old girl in a school uniform, standing on courthouse steps, surrounded by bikers who'd shown up to protect her. That photograph reminded her why she'd become a judge. Not for power, not for prestige, but to ensure that every frightened victim, every vulnerable witness, every person seeking justice would be heard, believed, and protected in her courtroom. Dragon retired from electrical work at age 65, but never retired from being Sophie's father. He attended many of her court proceedings, sitting quietly in the gallery, watching his daughter dispense justice with wisdom and compassion. "Your mother would be so proud," he told Sophie one evening over dinner. "She'd be proud of you too, Dad," Sophie replied. "You taught me to never back down. You showed me that family isn't just blood. It's the people who stand beside you when everything falls apart." "Those bikers saved you," Dragon said. "No," Sophie corrected gently. "They saved us. They showed me that the scariest-looking people can have the biggest hearts, that justice sometimes needs witnesses, that corruption thrives in darkness, but withers when exposed to light." The Devil's Disciples Motorcycle Club eventually disbanded, members retiring or moving away. But the friendships forged during Sophie's trial lasted forever. Spike became Sophie's investigator when she started her law practice, before her judgeship. Hammer attended her wedding and walked her down the aisle alongside Dragon when she married a fellow attorney at age 28. Ghost, the quiet road captain, died of cancer at age 62. At his funeral, Sophie delivered the eulogy. She talked about the day a scared 14-year-old girl needed heroes, and how Ghost and his brothers had answered that call without hesitation. "Ghost once told me," Sophie said through tears, "that family shows up. He showed up for me when I was a stranger. He sat in a courtroom for hours, just to make sure a corrupt judge knew someone was watching. He never asked for recognition or reward. He just did what was right because that's who he was." 50 bikers from various clubs attended Ghost's funeral. They gave him a send-off worthy of a hero, which is exactly what he'd been. Sophie Chen sat in her judicial chambers, now 37 years old and one of the most respected judges in the state. She'd just finished a difficult trial involving a teenage assault victim, a 16-year-old girl whose stepfather had abused her for years. The defense attorney had tried every trick to discredit the girl, suggested she was lying for attention, implied she was too troubled to be believed, questioned why she hadn't reported earlier. Sophie had shut down every improper question. She'd protected the witness while still allowing the defense to present their case. The jury had convicted the stepfather on all counts. After the verdict, the teenage girl approached Sophie's bench. "Thank you, Your Honor," the girl said quietly. "My school counselor told me about your case, about what happened to you. She said if anyone would believe me, you would." Sophie felt tears threatening but maintained her composure. "I believed you because you told the truth. That's all that matters in my courtroom." The counselor also said that bikers showed up for you. That's why I wasn't surprised when I saw them in the gallery today. Sophie had noticed. 15 bikers, including some now in their 70s, had attended this trial. The courtroom watch program was still active, still ensuring vulnerable witnesses had silent protectors present. "They show up because they believe in justice," Sophie explained. "Just like I do. Just like you did by having the courage to testify." That evening, Sophie met with Reaper at their regular monthly coffee date. He was 68 now, white-haired and moving slower, but still sharp as ever. "Another conviction," Reaper said approvingly. "You're batting 1,000 on assault cases." "It's not about convictions," Sophie said. "It's about making sure victims are heard and respected throughout the process. Sometimes the defendant is acquitted because there isn't enough evidence, and that's okay. But no victim in my courtroom will ever be mocked or dismissed because of who they are or where they come from. That's why we still show up," Reaper said. "The courtroom watch program has expanded to 17 states now. Over 500 bikers participate regularly. We attend trials, document proceedings, and report concerns to judicial oversight committees." "How many judges have been disciplined because of your reports?" Sophie asked. 43 in 15 years. Nothing as dramatic as Blackwell, but plenty of smaller biases and improper conduct that got corrected. The program works because judges know they're being watched by people who actually care about justice, not just winning cases. Sophie smiled. "You know what's funny? When I was 14, I thought bikers were scary. Now I know they're some of the most justice-oriented people I've ever met." "We've had our share of bad apples," Reaper admitted. "But most of us ride because we value freedom, loyalty, and protecting those who can't protect themselves. Your case gave us a mission, a way to channel that protective instinct into something constructive." "I'm writing a book," Sophie said suddenly. Reaper looked surprised. "About what?" "About my case, about judicial corruption and bias, about how 100 bikers changed my life and changed the justice system, about what happens when ordinary citizens refuse to accept injustice." "What are you going to call it?" Sophie pulled out her laptop and showed him the draft title page. "Silent Witnesses: How Motorcycle Clubs Reformed Judicial Oversight." Reaper laughed. "That's going to make a lot of judges uncomfortable." "Good. They should be uncomfortable. Comfort breeds complacency, and complacency enables corruption. If my story makes judges think twice before showing bias, then every moment of pain I experienced will have served a purpose." The book was published 2 years later to significant acclaim. Legal scholars praised its analysis of judicial oversight mechanisms. Victims' advocates appreciated its focus on protecting vulnerable witnesses. And bikers nationwide felt seen and respected in ways mainstream media rarely portrayed them. Judge Howard Blackwell read the book. Sophie had included his statement of responsibility in full, along with a fair but unflinching account of his conduct. She'd also included his later work speaking to law students about ethics. Blackwell wrote Sophie a letter, not expecting forgiveness, just acknowledgement. "Ms. Chen," the letter read, "I've read your book 3 times. Each reading is painful but necessary. You've documented my failures with accuracy and given me more credit for my eventual accountability than I deserve. I destroyed my career and nearly destroyed you. That you survived and thrived is no credit to me. But perhaps my story can serve as a warning to other judges tempted by the corruption of power. If my failures prevent even one judge from making similar mistakes, then perhaps I can leave some small positive legacy. You owed me nothing, yet you treated my story fairly. That's more grace than I ever showed you. Thank you." Sophie never responded to the letter. Some wounds heal better without reopening. But she kept the letter in her desk drawer, a reminder that people can change, acknowledge mistakes, and try to make amends, even if forgiveness isn't guaranteed. On the 20th anniversary of the day, 100 bikers filled Judge Blackwell's courtroom, the Devil's Disciples Alumni Association, as the retired members now called themselves, threw a celebration. Sophie was 34, a respected judge, married with 2 children. Dragon was 65, retired but active in motorcycle club veteran programs, and dozens of bikers who'd been part of that legendary silent protest attended the reunion. They gathered at the old clubhouse, now converted to a community center that provided legal aid services and youth mentorship programs. The building was renamed the Little Dragon Justice Center, despite Sophie's protests. Reaper, now 68 and walking with a cane, stood to address the crowd. 20 years ago, a 14-year-old girl walked into a courtroom and was mocked by a judge who thought he was untouchable. That girl had every reason to give up, to hide, to let the system's failure define her. Everyone turned to look at Sophie, who stood in the back with her family. But she didn't give up, Reaper continued. She fought back, and we had the privilege of fighting alongside her. What we did, filling that courtroom, sitting in silence, watching that corrupt judge every day, that wasn't heroic. That was just showing up. That was just refusing to look away when injustice happened. He raised his glass. To Sophie Chen, who taught us that the scariest thing to corrupt power isn't violence. It's witnesses. It's people who refuse to be silent. It's 100 bikers who will sit in a courtroom day after day until justice is served. Everyone raised their glasses. To Sophie! After the toast, people shared stories. Tank, now 71, talked about the phone calls that had gone out that first night. I've been in this life 40 years. Never seen clubs unite like they did for Sophie. Rivals, competition, different territories. None of that mattered. We had a common enemy, judicial corruption. Hammer, 68, shared his favorite memory. Day 3, Judge Blackwell made a fair ruling in a case, actually followed the law instead of his usual favoritism. After court, I heard him tell his clerk, "I can't bend the rules with all these witnesses watching." That's when I knew we'd won. Not because we intimidated him, but because we reminded him what his job was supposed to be. Jennifer Walsh, now the district attorney, spoke about the legal impact. Sophie's case changed how we handle judicial oversight in this state. The Chen Transparency Initiative has resulted in better recording equipment in every courtroom, easier complaint processes, and faster investigation of judicial misconduct. In 20 years, we've disciplined 43 judges, and I'd bet most of that is because judges know citizens are watching. Sophie was asked to speak. She approached the microphone with her 2 children, a 7-year-old daughter named Rebecca, after her late mother, and a 5-year-old son named Michael, after Dragon's real name. I've spent 20 years thinking about what happened in that courtroom, Sophie began. About Judge Blackwell's cruelty, about Derek Morrison's crime, about the system that failed me. But mostly, I think about what happened the next day, about waking up feeling broken, and then learning that 100 bikers were riding to the courthouse to stand with me. Her voice wavered slightly. I was 14. I didn't know most of you. My dad knew some of you through his club, but I was just a kid who played violin and studied too much. I wasn't part of your world. But you made me part of your family anyway. Rebecca tugged on Sophie's sleeve. Mommy, why are you crying? Because these people saved my life, sweetheart, Sophie said, wiping her eyes. When I needed heroes, they showed up wearing leather and riding motorcycles, and they taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about who stands beside you when everything falls apart. She looked around the room at the aging bikers, many now grandparents themselves, some battling health issues, all still carrying themselves with quiet dignity. You didn't just save me from a corrupt judge. You saved me from giving up on justice. You showed me that the system can work if people care enough to make it work. You taught me that the scariest-looking people can have the biggest hearts. And you proved that ordinary citizens can hold extraordinary power when they refuse to accept injustice. She raised her own glass. To every biker who sat in that courtroom, to every person who wrote letters of support, to every witness who refused to look away. You changed my life. You changed the justice system. And you proved that angels don't always wear white. Sometimes they wear leather and ride Harleys. The room erupted in applause. Dragon stood beside his daughter, tears streaming down his weathered face. His little girl had not only survived, but had transformed her trauma into a mission that had improved the justice system for countless others. A filmmaker named Marcus Rodriguez released a documentary called Silent Witnesses: The Bikers Who Changed Justice. The film featured interviews with Sophie, now 39 and being considered for the appellate court, Reaper, 73, Dragon, 70, Jennifer Walsh, retired, and dozens of other participants in the original courthouse protest. The documentary included the actual court recordings from Sophie's original trial. Hearing Judge Blackwell's voice, the dismissive laughter, the cruel words, the blatant bias, shocked audiences even 25 years later. But the film's most powerful moment came when they showed footage of the second day. Security camera footage from the courthouse captured the scene. 100 bikers entering the building in silence, going through security with perfect cooperation, and filing into the courtroom with military precision. The documentary interviewed several jurors from Derek Morrison's retrial. One woman, now in her 60s, said, "I remember seeing those bikers in the gallery every day. It reminded me that this case mattered, that we had to take it seriously, that people were watching to make sure we did the right thing." The film also tracked what happened to the key players. Judge Howard Blackwell died at age 77, 3 years before the documentary was released. In his final interview, conducted 6 months before his death, he said, "I spent 12 years corrupting justice and 25 years trying to make amends. I'll be remembered as the judge who mocked Sophie Chen. That's appropriate. That's what I deserve to be remembered for. I only hope that my failure serves as a lesson." Chief Robert Morrison retired in disgrace, his son's conviction destroying his career. He died at age 71, estranged from Derek, alone and bitter. Derek Morrison served his sentence and was released at age 22. He violated his parole 3 years later with another assault charge and served additional time. At age 38, he lived in a different state, working minimum-wage jobs, his promising future destroyed by his actions and his father's attempts to protect him. He declined to be interviewed for the documentary. Jennifer Walsh became district attorney and later a judge herself. She credited Sophie's case with teaching her that sometimes prosecutors have to fight the system itself, not just defendants. Dragon, Michael Chen, retired from the Devil's Disciples, but remained active in motorcycle culture. He split his time between his grandchildren and mentoring young bikers about using their clubs for positive community impact. Reaper continued leading the Courtroom Watch program until he was 75, when health issues forced his retirement. Under his leadership, the program expanded nationwide and documented over 300 cases of judicial misconduct. And Sophie Chen continued serving as a judge, her courtroom known as the fairest in the state. She never forgot where she came from or who had stood beside her when she needed it most. The documentary ended with footage from Sophie's courtroom. A young witness, nervous and scared, testified about abuse she'd suffered. Sophie listened with patience and compassion, protecting the witness from aggressive cross-examination while still allowing the defense to present their case. In the gallery sat 15 bikers, silent, watching, ensuring this witness had the protection Sophie once needed. After the testimony, Sophie called a recess. The witness approached the bench. "Thank you, Your Honor," the young woman said. "I was so scared to testify, but my counselor told me about your story. She said if anyone would believe me, you would." Sophie smiled gently. "I believe you because you're telling the truth. And those gentlemen in the back? They're here to make sure everyone takes your testimony seriously." The witness looked back at the bikers, who nodded respectfully. "They look scary," the young woman whispered. "They are scary," Sophie agreed. "Scary to people who try to hurt vulnerable witnesses, but to people seeking justice, they're guardian angels who happen to ride motorcycles." The documentary closed with title cards. Sophie Chen currently serves as a judge on the State Superior Court. She is being considered for appointment to the Federal District Court. The Courtroom Watch program operates in 37 states with over 2,000 active participants. Judicial misconduct complaints have increased 340% since the Chen Transparency Initiative was implemented, leading to greater accountability for judges. The Little Dragon Justice Center has provided free legal services to over 10,000 people in 20 years. And somewhere, in a courtroom near you, bikers are sitting quietly in the gallery, watching, ensuring justice is served, making sure no judge ever forgets that someone is always watching. Sophie Chen was appointed to the Federal District Court at age 47, becoming one of the youngest federal judges in history. Her confirmation hearing was attended by over 50 bikers, including several now in their 80s, who sat in the gallery wearing their colors proudly. During her confirmation hearing, a senator asked, "Judge Chen, some critics suggest your association with motorcycle clubs raises questions about your judgment. How do you respond?" Sophie looked at the bikers in the gallery, men and women who'd fought for her when the system failed, who'd shown her what real justice looked like, who'd taught her that family transcends blood. "Senator," Sophie replied, 30 years ago, a corrupt judge told me I wasn't worth believing because my father belonged to a motorcycle club. He called me biker brat and dismissed my assault case based on prejudice. The next day, 100 bikers filled his courtroom and reminded him that justice should be blind to family background. She paused, letting that sink in. Those bikers didn't use violence. They didn't threaten anyone. They simply exercised their constitutional right to observe court proceedings, and in doing so, they exposed corruption, protected a vulnerable victim, and helped reform judicial oversight in this country. If associating with people who stand up for justice and protect the vulnerable raises questions about my judgment, then I'm proud of that association. The gallery erupted in applause, including several senators. Sophie was confirmed unanimously. Dragon attended the ceremony from a wheelchair. He was 77 now, his riding days behind him, but his spirit undiminished. As Sophie took the oath to become a federal judge, Dragon wept openly. Beside him sat Reaper, now 80, also in a wheelchair. The two old bikers clasped hands while watching little Dragon achieve what she'd promised 30 years ago. "We did good, brother," Reaper whispered. "She did good," Dragon corrected. "We just showed up." "Sometimes showing up is everything," Reaper replied. After the ceremony, Sophie approached the two men in wheelchairs. She knelt down between them, this powerful federal judge humbling herself before two aging bikers who'd changed her life. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything. For showing up. For staying. For teaching me what justice really means." Dragon took her hand. "You would have been extraordinary with or without us, baby girl. We just made sure you got the chance to prove it." "No," Sophie said firmly. "I would have given up. I would have believed what Judge Blackwell said about me. You showed me that one corrupt judge doesn't define justice. You showed me that ordinary people have extraordinary power when they refuse to accept wrong." Reaper smiled. "You know what the best part is? It's not just you. The Courtroom Watch program has protected hundreds of witnesses over 30 years. Dozens have become lawyers and judges because they saw that justice can work if people make it work. You started a revolution, little Dragon." "We started a revolution," Sophie corrected. "All of us together." Sophie Chen served as a federal judge for 12 years before being nominated to the Circuit Court of Appeals at age 59. The confirmation hearing featured testimony from victims' advocates, reformed judges, and yes, representatives from motorcycle clubs who explained the lasting impact of the Courtroom Watch program. Throughout her career, Sophie never forgot the lesson she learned at age 14, that justice requires witnesses, that power unchecked becomes corruption, and that the scariest-looking people can have the most honorable hearts. Dragon passed away at age 83, surrounded by family and club brothers. Over 200 bikers attended his funeral, including members from clubs across the country. Sophie delivered the eulogy, talking about a single father who'd raised his daughter to believe in justice, who'd controlled his rage when the system failed her, and who'd trusted his club brothers to do what was right. "My father taught me strength," Sophie said through tears, "but his brothers taught me that strength without wisdom is just violence. They showed me that real power comes from restraint, from showing up, from refusing to look away when injustice happens." She looked at the assembled bikers. "People see your leather and your patches and they make assumptions. They see danger. They see criminals. They see threats. But I see guardians. I see protectors. I see people who've dedicated decades to ensuring that vulnerable witnesses have advocates in courtrooms across this country." After the funeral, Reaper, now 86 and in failing health, approached Sophie. "Your dad was my brother," Reaper said. "Not by blood, but by choice. That means you're my family too. Always have been. Always will be." "I know," Sophie said, hugging him carefully. "You've been my uncle for over 30 years. Reaper died 6 months later. At his funeral, Sophie wore her honorary Hell's Angels vest, the one given to her at high school graduation. She stood at the podium and told the story of the day 100 bikers filled a corrupt judge's courtroom. Reaper led that charge, Sophie said. He made the calls, he organized the clubs, he turned my personal tragedy into a movement for justice. Everything that came after, the Courtroom Watch program, the judicial reforms, the hundreds of witnesses who've been protected, all of it started with Reaper deciding that a 14-year-old girl deserved better than what she received. She paused, looking at the casket draped with Hell's Angels colors. He was scary. I won't lie about that. When I first saw him walk into that courtroom, I was intimidated. But I learned that scary and dangerous aren't the same thing. Dangerous is a judge who mocks victims. Dangerous is power without accountability. Scary? Scary is 100 bikers who show up to remind the powerful that someone is watching. The Courtroom Watch program continued after Reaper's death, now run by a younger generation of bikers who'd heard the story of Sophie Chen and been inspired to continue the mission. On the 50th anniversary of the day, 100 bikers filled Judge Blackwell's courtroom. The American Bar Association held a special commemorative event. Judge Sophie Chen, now 64 and serving on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, was the keynote speaker. The event was held in a courthouse, appropriately enough, in the same building where it had all begun 50 years earlier. Department 7, once Judge Blackwell's domain, now bore a plaque. In this courtroom, Sophie Chen was denied justice. The next day, 100 citizens reminded us all that justice requires witnesses. Sophie stood at the podium, looking out at an audience of judges, lawyers, advocates, and yes, bikers. Some were original participants, now in their 80s and 90s. Most were younger members who'd joined the Courtroom Watch program in the decades since. 50 years ago, Sophie began. I was a terrified 14-year-old who'd been assaulted and then humiliated by a judge who believed his power made him untouchable. I walked out of this courthouse believing the system had failed me. That justice was a lie told to naive people like me who still believed in fairness. She paused, emotion thick in her voice. The next morning, I came back to this courthouse surrounded by bikers, men and women who didn't know me, who had no obligation to help me, who risked their time, their reputations, and their freedom to stand with a stranger. And they sat in that courtroom, she pointed to the doors behind her, in absolute silence, for days, until a corrupt judge realized he wasn't untouchable after all. The audience listened intently. People have asked me over the years, why did it take bikers? Why not lawyers or activists or politicians? And I think it's because bikers understand something that people in power sometimes forget. They understand that freedom requires protection, that justice requires vigilance, and that sometimes the most effective protest isn't violence or threats, it's simply refusing to look away. She gestured to the bikers in the audience. These people, these supposedly scary, dangerous criminals, changed the American justice system. The Courtroom Watch program they created has operated in all 50 states for 45 years. Over 15,000 witnesses have testified with bikers present to ensure fair treatment. 217 judges have been disciplined for misconduct documented by Courtroom Watch participants, and thousands of law students have learned that judicial power requires public accountability. Sophie pulled out a photograph, the famous image from 50 years ago, 100 bikers sitting in perfect silence while Judge Blackwell presided uncomfortably. This photograph hangs in every courtroom I've ever served in. It reminds me daily that I serve the people, not power, that justice requires witnesses, and that my job is sacred precisely because people care enough to watch and hold me accountable. She looked directly at the younger bikers in the audience. To those of you who continue this work, thank you. You're not just observing trials, you're guarding democracy, you're protecting the vulnerable. You're ensuring that what happened to me 50 years ago never happens to anyone else. That's heroic work, even if it looks like you're just sitting quietly in courtrooms. The speech concluded with a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. After the event, Sophie returned to Department 7 alone. She sat in the gallery where her father had sat 50 years ago, where bikers had filled every seat the next day, where justice had been denied and then demanded. She thought about Judge Blackwell, dead for over 20 years, whose career had ended because he'd forgotten that power requires responsibility. She thought about Derek Morrison, now 69, who'd spent much of his life paying for his crime and his father's attempted cover-up. She thought about all the witnesses the Courtroom Watch program had protected over 5 decades. Most of all, she thought about a 14-year-old girl who'd walked into this courtroom terrified and left humiliated, only to return the next day surrounded by an army of leather-clad guardians. That girl had grown into a federal appellate judge. She'd helped reform judicial oversight. She'd protected thousands of witnesses. She'd shown that one person's trauma, when transformed into mission, could change systems. A court security officer approached. "Judge Chen, we're closing the building." Sophie stood. "I was just remembering." "The famous case?" the officer asked. "Everyone knows what happened here." "Do they know why it mattered?" Sophie asked. The officer thought for a moment. "Because justice failed and citizens made it work." "Exactly," Sophie said. "Systems don't fix themselves. People fix systems, and sometimes those people ride motorcycles." As she left the courthouse for the last time that day, Sophie noticed a group of younger bikers, men and women in their 20s and 30s, gathering outside. They wore Courtroom Watch vests and carried notebooks. "Judge Chen," one young woman approached. "We're about to observe a trial, domestic violence case. The victim is scared to testify." Sophie smiled. "Then you're exactly where you need to be. That witness needs to know someone is watching, that someone cares if justice is served." "We learned from your story, ma'am," another biker said. "You taught us that showing up matters." "No," Sophie corrected gently. 100 bikers taught me that showing up matters. I just made sure everyone else learned the same lesson. Now you're passing it to the next generation. That's how change becomes permanent." She watched them enter the courthouse. These young guardians of justice, continuing work that began 50 years ago when a corrupt judge underestimated the power of citizens who refused to accept injustice. Sophie Chen walked to her car, carrying decades of memories and a simple truth, that angels don't always wear white, that justice requires witnesses, and that sometimes 100 bikers sitting silently in a courtroom can change the world. The end came not with drama, but with quiet satisfaction. The work continued. New witnesses were protected. New judges were held accountable. And somewhere in America, in a courtroom not unlike Department 7, bikers sat in the gallery, watching, ensuring justice was served. Because 50 years ago, a 14-year-old girl named Sophie Chen learned that family isn't blood. Justice requires vigilance, and the scariest-looking people can have the most honorable hearts. And that lesson, passed down through generations of Courtroom Watch participants, continued to protect the vulnerable and hold the powerful accountable. If you believe bikers are good people, subscribe to this channel and show us your support.